Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, joined once more by Tate for the first entry in our new sort of review series. It's fairly self-explanatory, a deep dive into, and this is the review show where we pick a film, whether a new release, whether something's celebrating an anniversary, and we do a bit of a deep dive into it, talking in the cast, the performances, moments, the score, everything you'd expect, and a little bit more. So, yeah, this is the first episode. We're talking Killers of the Flower Moon, now out in cinemas worldwide, directed by Martin Scorsese, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Lily Gladstone, Robert De Niro. But first of all, Tate, how are you doing?
Yeah, doing good. I'm glad that I'm finally able to talk about this film a little bit more in depth. I know for the people who have seen our previous review from the film festival, I did a very short summary of it and my initial thoughts on the film. It's one of the best films of the year. That's clear. Everyone's kind of agreeing with that. But now it's time to actually, have a proper deep dive into it and really kind of get into the nitty-gritty with the film.
Yeah, and there's a lot to talk about. It's been in production for quite a while. I'm sure everybody's heard about the runtime, 3 hours and 24 minutes to be precise, which has been a part of the discussion everywhere else. But we do want to hear from you. So please do comment below your thoughts on Killers of the Flower Moon. We're doing this live. If you're watching on the stream, you're more than welcome to comment along. When we're discussing the origins of this series and what we want to do, one of the key things is that we just don't want to call them spoiler discussions. By the logic of that, do talk about what you may consider to be a spoiler. Don't ignore it's not called a spoiler discussion. It's an open conversation to talk about the film as a whole. It just feels weird using words like spoiler discussion for Killers of the Flower Moon in comparison to something, say, Star Wars, Marvel, etc., etc. So
yeah, it's a real life event. So
yeah, it's just weird. Like it's about finding the right terms and whatnot. And yeah, as you said, it's non-fiction as well. So there's obviously a lot of stuff there. So we do want to hear from people. If you're not watching it live, do leave us a comment after. And we do want to hear from people that may have seen this over the weekend. Maybe saw it at a festival. It's premiered back at Cannes in May. So some people saw it as long ago as them. It's been at New York Film Festival. It's been at London Film Festival. It's been at a few others, I believe. It's been getting around. And obviously, we'll be talking some of the behind the scenes. We'll be talking maybe a little bit of the marketing as well, because obviously we've got the SCG strike still ongoing. So we've not heard from any of the actors for obvious reasons. And it's been essentially Martin Scorsese doing his own marketing, which is, I actually think, quite interesting. Certainly more so than other directors if they were. But yes. And people at home, if you want to follow us, you want to find out about other announcements, get us on Linktree, linktree.com/cinemasavvy. That's got links to our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd, where we do put everything else. But Tate, I want to sort of jump to you. We did the review. Well, you did the review a couple of weeks ago at London Film Festival. That was 2 weeks ago this weekend, I think.
Yeah,
we premiered on the first Saturday. Talk us through your. I mean, I know we've got the 10-minute video, but talk us through your initial thoughts and maybe the last couple of weeks when you're thinking back to it, what your sort of feelings are heading into today.
So my initial thoughts at the time were, first of all, this is the best film I've seen at the festival. This is easily one of the best films at the festival and one of the best films I've seen this year. I love Scorsese. I think he's a fantastic director. He's got such a good catalogue of films across a variety of different genres, but Scorsese does very well with his kind of, historical biopics. I know that on our intro here we had Gangs of New York as one of the posters coming into the cinema, and he's able to kind of bring history to life through events and retellings, and he's able to, adjust the story slightly but make them entertaining. And I was really excited going into the film. I absolutely loved it. It was a long film, and the only kind of initial negative I could have given was it needed an intermission. It needed something to break up the film. It's very difficult to sit down in the screening for that amount of time. And the film does slow down in certain parts, and you do kind of feel like it drags in certain areas, but it's telling out the full story. And I want to remain invested in that story. So to be able to do that, you do need a pause in there. I don't think it helped, and this is going to be a little bit of a criticism for London Film Festival, but when they were putting it into the screening, they weren't allowing people to go to the toilet until the film had actually started, which is absolutely insane. It was the only film where they did this. I'm very lucky I managed to go to the toilet before getting into the actual screening, but I know a few people around me were having to either hold it in or having to dip midway through the film just because they weren't allowing people to go once they'd got their seats. which is, once again, I mean, that adds in with the runtime and everything like that, but it's a bit of a criticism of the festival there in itself. But phenomenal score, phenomenal acting, phenomenal cinematography, phenomenal directing, just everything across the board was absolutely phenomenal, and it still holds up to being easily one of the best films of the year.
Yeah, I'm quite intrigued with this because I know we spoke about the festival. I'm not going to joke that I don't watch any films. It's become a bit of a thing online. But I think even before this happened, I did say to you, I was like, I'm only going to go on the Saturday if we get, not like snobby, if we get into the Scorsese like red carpet, but he did like a
screen talk,
and you could do ballot. If you didn't get a ticket when they went on sale, and they did a ballot so people could get tickets, didn't get one. So I was like, okay, I'm happy to wait like 10, 11 days to watch it in the comfort of not just like a local cinema, but it's got an IMAX release, which I'll talk about briefly. But 3.5 hour film in the comfort of a cinema that I know, in chairs that I know I can sit through fine, etc., etc. And I was happy to wait, and I was very excited that pretty much everybody seemed to love it at the festival. Now, we are obviously talking within industry terms that is a film festival in press screening, so everybody there is not looking forward to it, but that's not the general audience. And that's like a massive, massive thing for people to understand. And I know that the runtime has been a big discussion point, and kind of going off mine, I went on, they showed it early in the UK. We got it on Thursday, and they were doing showings at 7 p.m. on IMAX. Now, I always advocate going to IMAX and stuff like this, and it is the best format. Obviously, this was not shot on IMAX at all. This is an Oppenheimer, but I was really curious that Apple are doing this for Napoleon as well as Because of Family, 2 historical dramas shot by Scorsese, not shot on IMAX, but they want people to experience it on the biggest screen they can. They have snapped up IMAX rights now. It does help, obviously, that in an alternate world, Dune Part 2 came out this weekend. So obviously, Killers of the Flower Moon changed its release date to get June. I think it's a week earlier, so it could get the June slot, basically. And it obviously took the IMAX screens with it. And if I give my initial thoughts on the film, it's quite comfortably one of the best ones I've seen this year. It's probably my top 2. I've not seen all that many in comparison to normal. I'm only at about 50-ish for this year. So I've got a couple of big hits I still want to see that could creep up there. But this is sat in the top 2. It is an exceptional piece of filmmaking. It's tricky to use terms like I love the film because when you know the subject matter and whatnot. But in terms of direction, I had a very good time with the film. And the thing that sort of elaborated and stuck with me most, that people were talking about this being a $200 million film. And people have been talking about the box office. Oh, is it going to be a hit? Is it not? This was going to be released by Apple originally. Past filming, but before now, this was originally going to be a very limited cinema run. And it would then go on to Apple for streaming, which it's still going to do. But what we have here is a wide release film that has no streaming date. It's not Netflix who say we'll put it in the cinemas for 2 weeks and it's just at these small independent cinemas. Nothing wrong with those. But the option to watch this at any chain, at any point this week, on an IMAX is massively appealing. Now, to me, yes, it's not shot on IMAX, but I got to see a $200 million film that looks like a $200 million film on the biggest screen possible. And you're able to take in not just so much more with that, but you're able to really take in like the production value from the costumes through to the set designs and stuff like this. That's why I like the IMAX format. And I know that Denis Villeneuve spoke recently saying that the audience wants to go to the biggest screen possible, which is why the IMAX slots are so prestigious now. And like I said, this isn't shot on the format. It's not utilized in the same way Oppenheimer is, but there's something just quite nice about being able to watch a different film in IMAX. That it's not a superhero film, it's not a Nolan film, it's not a blockbuster. It's a drama that's going to be very much nominated for awards this year. That's going to be spoken about for years to come, starring one of the greatest actors of all time and probably the best actor of this current generation, you know. And I absolutely loved it for that. So I have a very weird experience. It was only about 15 people. It wasn't busy at all. Everyone had a good seat. You basically had your own row, which is great. I didn't need the loo again, right? The benefit of going in the evening. I know there's going to be 25 minutes of adverts because it's at Cineworld. So I could go nip to the loo during adverts, knowing there's my 3.5 hour slot. Whereas you guys were queuing outside for hours and, you know, and not to be snobby, like it was at Picture House Central where you watched it, which is a lovely cinema. But in my head, I'm like, I want to pick my own seat for this. Like, this is one where I'm willing to wait to do it. Again, it wasn't long to wait. So my experience, I loved. Except one person in front of me got the phones out 2 hours and 45 minutes in with sound effects on their phone. Old person, which made it worse. But yeah, my initial thoughts are I think it's an exceptional piece of filmmaking. It's kind of like not why we're doing this series, but you spoke to me saying like you'd want to talk about this in more detail, and I said I'm not bothered. I missed the review, but I'd like this film warrants that discussion, not because of its runtime, but it should be so much more than just us chatting spoilers, shouldn't it? And this 100%. Is what we're able to do with this series like this.
And cinema isn't always about kind of the content of it, because obviously it's an experience. And we talked about this over the years, especially during the pandemic where we did some videos on it. And I mean, I've got what could be considered as close to a home cinema setup I'm probably ever going to get, which is a projector pointing at that wall in my room. And it doesn't compare at all to sitting in a cinema with perfect sound and just being immersed in it. And the experience you get with different films will obviously have a massive effect on how you receive the film, how you kind of, whether you like the film or whether you don't like the film, it's going to have that kind of effect on you. And seeing that film in IMAX, I can only imagine the spectacle of it would just blind you almost. It's just the filmmaking that goes into it, the direction, the landscape, just everything, the production, everything, like you've said. And going and watch it in a cinema and having that experience is how it's intended to be made. I know that Apple TV and Apple have funded part of the film and it will eventually end up on their platform. But what I love about it is they've encouraged people to go to the cinemas and go see it. They've put on IMAX screenings for it. They've gone and done this kind of wider release with the cinemas. So people are given the opportunity and given the chance to go and see it how it's intended, in the way it's intended. Whether it means that it's going to be difficult to be able to kind of watch the film and go to bathroom breaks. I know this is something that, I'm not going to say target audience for the film, but you said an older person had their phone out. I'm sure that, a lot of older people are going to be wanting to go and watch this film. It's a historical drama. Doesn't matter whether it's got Scorsese's name slapped on it or not. It's that kind of film where it's going to attract an interesting demographic. My question to you is, were you the youngest person in the screening? Or were there people around your age or was it older?
I'd say it was probably actually spread out. There was a couple of people like our age, a couple of people older. And it was just really intriguing. Like Thursday night, it's not a prime cinema day. No. I was going to go on the Friday night, but I had Friday off and I wanted to play a Spider-Man game. I was like, brilliant. Thursday works in my favourite. I literally got home at 11:30 and I was just half an hour wait to start playing. And it was interesting that, again, I didn't expect big numbers. Like Oppenheimer, like the scale of that film, okay, BFI IMAX sold out. Of course it was sold out. It sold out minutes after it went on sale. Fine. But when we terms like normal screenings that were sold out, I was like, I did not expect on a Sunday lunchtime for Oppenheimer. And one thing I've kind of wondered is if there are certain people who, not like criticizing online echo chambers, but I've seen some people comparing us to Oppenheimer in aspects of box office, all this. It couldn't be more different. Two completely different directors. Yes, they're both full stars. Yes, they're two of the best working today. But from my perspective, one of the films about the atomic bomb, and that film is marketed as this is creating the atomic bomb. The entire audience know at some point they're going to do a nuke and it's going to be practical and we're all going to go watch it. That happened. People went. They wanted to see it. This is very different. I think a lot of people wouldn't know this is about the Osage murders.
I think a lot of people I know that, they kind of mentioned this is based off real life events and stuff like that, but I think a lot of people wouldn't even realize that this was based off real life events.
Yeah.
Unless they saw any of the marketing or, when they actually saw the film. If you're just talking about, Killers of the Flower Moon, it's a historical epic. I assume it's kind of, a bit like how
DiCaprio De Niro has been the trident of marketing this film. And,
exactly.
And obviously we've got the SUG strike. So, they've not been able to market the film. The two lead actors say we just had Scorsese by himself. Obviously, Lily Gladstone as well. Obviously, not a household name in a phenomenal performance. And we'll talk about the performances later on as well. But I just found it very interesting that there are certain. And I mean, I know we can moan about terrible online takes all the time, but even the stuff with the runtime is interesting, which we'll get into a little bit later. But I just think heading into this, it's really interesting that we have this film coming out, and I think it's a miracle we're in this place. Like, now we've been talking about the opportunity to see these films. I'm going back to The Irishman again. But that was 2019. Netflix, only showing it every month for like a week, and showcases and like really independent cinemas. And because Netflix don't release their box office numbers, it did make me wonder that, okay, because the Flower Moon is not going to be, if it was released never even to begin with Apple, it probably wouldn't have a big box office. And it's not about the numbers. And I want to say this actually straight away. It's not about the numbers for some films. If it's a studio created cinematic universe franchise sequel, it is about the numbers because they're funded and produced for their numbers and what they make.
Yeah.
Films and this is where the Scorsese Marvel stuff's been doing. I know we're sort of on a tangent away from the film now, but he's just answering questions he's being asked. That he never once outright says, I hate these films are rubbish, I hate these people, I hate this production, I hate this company. Everything stems from the conversation of him saying, yes, there are $200 million budget superhero films, but there should also be $200 million budget drama films. And that's been his point from day one. And I know that it's harder to compare Barbie to this, but I look at Barbie, Oppenheimer, and Because the Flower Moon is 3 films made by 3 different filmmakers with high budgets. And I can look at these 3 films and say, I see that budget on your screen. I see that in the costumes. I see that in the production. I see you shooting on location, which is expensive. I see you doing this practically and on a set. I don't see you in these dreadful blue screens, chopping and changing things at the last 3 seconds, putting more pressure onto your visual effects artists, thus making the film worse because it looks unwatchable. And then you find out that's got a $300 million budget, not naming names because you can pick loads of them now.
Of course. And it's getting more and more rampant nowadays, shall we say. And I can understand I can understand because I still have an appeal for those kind of films and I will still continue to watch those kind of films. But I can also kind of completely understand kind of, it's not even saying it's real cinema. It's kind of, actually seeing the production, actually seeing kind of the effort put on screen. And the fact that people are turning around and going, well, budgets used to be lower and the films look better. You look at this film and you go, okay, you can fully understand how pretty this film looks and you can fully understand where the production kind of the budget and everything went into it. It's kind of just an overall very good production, if that makes sense.
No, I'm with you 100%. And we'll talk some Oscar stuff towards the end of this because it will be a big hit.
God, it'll be a long list of categories this is probably going to get nominated for. And the question will be, will it be matched by Oppenheimer? Which one will get the most nominations kind of thing in the end?
That's the big
question.
It's the outlets that focus on that, without getting into it, Oppenheimer's at the moment being spoken about for 15 nominations. Now, I haven't read them because
isn't the
October.
record like 13 for Lord of the Rings off the top of my head?
I just until it's January and there's actual nominations, I don't care. That's more the outlets that do that. But let's talk some production for this. So we've spoken about Scorsese, and the way we kind of want to do the series, we want to talk about the films in a bit more detail, and not like the retrospectives. We're not sitting here laying just behind the scenes. But for this one, it's based off real life, the Osage murders. It's an adaptation of a book released in 2017, which I always find this fascinating with film. When the film rights to books are picked up before the books ever come out, I know that's a big thing. We did that last year with Jurassic Park was one of those. I can't remember if Jaws was also one of those, but we definitely covered it a couple of times with Spielberg stuff, and very much so with this sort of stuff. These get passed around Hollywood because there's no information to sort of say this going from. But let's be honest, 90% of like incredible books get adapted into films, don't they, at some point or another? So the rights for books are very lucrative. And the original title of this was Killers of the Flower Moon, The Osage Murders, and the Birth of the FBI. Now, I can't sit here and say I remember this book coming out. Dragon Tattoo Review comes out tomorrow where we do discuss something similar. But I remember when this film was first announced, and it was, I can't remember, it was around the time the Irishman, like maybe just after. But from day one, it was Leonardo DiCaprio is working with Scorsese again on an adaptation of Killers of the Flower Moon. I remember seeing a tweet from Empire on it. I was like, okay, don't know anything about this, but I'm intrigued. And then at some point, De Niro was brought on board. And I was like, is this the first time we've got De Niro and DiCaprio together? It's not. No. I believe it's the second time. But there is a very interesting story with Scorsese involved with those two. And the real life stuff is sort of quite interesting. So, I'm based in the UK. I don't know much about, not the history of America. I know the the obvious, no difference to the British Empire, right? The British Empire did terrible things to establish themselves as the British Empire. And yes, they should teach that in school before people know, because it's outrageous they don't. Obviously, America's had a very similar history. Not to get into a historical thing, I don't know my American history like UK history, but we know that the Native Americans were basically murdered and pillaged by the cowboys for their land, across the time of America being a free and independent country. But birthed in 1875, apparently, or however long they claim they were birthed, which clearly wasn't. Let's get that out of the way. But this book is really interesting because it was released 6 years ago. It's written by David Grant as well. And it covers the murders of the Osage people, which obviously this film does, but the perspective is very much the FBI side of things that, again, I've not read it, so I can't comment and elaborate in as much detail as I'd like to, but it focuses on the murders, but how the FBI then get involved and, not saying white savior, but the FBI's involvement, because the importance of the book is also the FBI side of things as well as the murders. And when Scorsese picks up, he inverts the book onto itself. He, rather than have the film about the FBI finding out about these murders, we are then placing the story in Osage with the murders, building relationships with people left, right, and center. And then we have the FBI come into it, which is basically the final act, the Jesse Plemons act, who's amazing. I want to get your thoughts on that story decision to invert it briefly before we talk about a couple of other things on the production too.
Yeah, so I really like it. I went and for research for this, I went and had a look at a few mini documentaries based on the murders and stuff like that, and based on kind of this time period and everything like that. And a lot of them do focus on, hey, the FBI got involved, they came in, and there aren't many kind of accounts where they go with the story of kind of actually showing the murders. They all talk about the FBI's involvement and how it was the early days of the FBI, and the FBI is kind of the sticker kind of marker, because that's kind of the big thing that's talked about nowadays, instead of people don't kind of go around and talking about Osage County murders or anything like that. So I'm kind of happy he was able to flip that on its head and kind of focus more on the actual atrocities that took place, and actually kind of give it not just its screen right, but also, actually make sure the story is told. Because I'm sure that people would love to hear about the birth of the FBI, but what's really interesting here is the human story behind it, and the actual people who are affected by it, and the murders that took place. So I'm glad that that's kind of the side of the story that was told in the end. There have been other adaptations of not this book, but there have been other books made and other film-based adaptations back in the 50s or something like that. I think there's one in the 30s as well, where they talk a bit more about kind of the murders that took place and everything like that. But this is, one of the greatest directors of all time, with some of the best actors of all time taking on this project. So I feel like, and I don't want to say that this is kind of going to be the sole reason for it, but I feel like this is going to give it a bit more longevity, and it's also going to give it a bit more of kind of people are going to care about it more, and people are actually going to notice it more. People are going to be kind of doing their research like I did, and looking up kind of what happened, and, seeing how they were able to kind of recover from it, and kind of openly talk about kind of the atrocities that, people actually committed back then, and make sure the story isn't buried. Because I know from a British side of things, I had never heard of this story until this film. And I'm sure that a lot of people would be the same.
I'm the exact same. I'm not hiding from that. And this is where I sort of advocate film a lot more. That obviously, anytime you watch a film that's based off real events, inspired by real events, historically real events, etc., 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 we've always been told from day one, don't take it with a pinch of salt. But what you are watching is a representation, and alongside representation, an interpretation of somebody's, whether it be a writer, a director, an actor, or anyone. It's their interpretation of these events. So it's not, I'm not going to sit here and say it's not 100% historically accurate. Look at Dunkirk, for example. Fictional protagonists with a very real background.
There's absolutely no way they can make it 100% fictionalized, especially for an event that took place back in the 1800s. There's no chance. Yeah. So
until the day where time travel is invented and people have got hidden cameras, it's never going to happen. And what I found quite fascinating with this is that when this premiered at Cannes in May this year, obviously after the immediate reaction, the embargo is lifted. One of the tribal chiefs came out. I've forgotten their name, but he essentially came out and said that I've worked with Martin Scorsese for numerous years on this.
Yeah, Jeffrey Standing Bear. So Scorsese went to Osage Nation, went to Oklahoma and met with him to discuss kind of how they could be involved in the film production and how they could help with kind of the accuracies with the story and everything like that. So he was on there pretty much. Scorsese signed on in kind of 2018 and they were chatting pretty much 2018, 2019, almost straight away.
Yeah, and it's things like this, but we'll get to direction shortly. But when someone of that significance to the community and the community they're representing as well, I forgot the name of one of the cast members went, I don't want to say viral, but one of the cast members, the American Red Carpet last week, not cast member, he was a translator. So he worked with the dialect, he worked with the teams to translate the native language into English, vice versa, for accuracy. He actually spoke about the film really eloquently and criticized it in a polite way. This is the red carpet. And this is what people are saying is where sort of Scorsese has this, not representation of the industry, but he has this sort of gravitas where he's worked with this community for years, and one of the key community members comes out and essentially says that, you know, it's still not the perspective of us. And one of my criticisms of the film actually is sort of Lily Gladstone not disappearing 2/3 in, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. But he sort of spoke about saying even with the director as amazing as Scorsese, it's still not one of our own telling the story. Now, that you can read that as a criticism, but if this is someone that's worked on the film, worked with Scorsese, their repertoire is still very positive. That's like a very valid criticism, and it's not even a major criticism. That's more to me an industry criticism where there are not opportunities for other filmmakers to step up. It brings an argument about even Martin Scorsese can't get funding to do films like this these days. So that says everything we need to say about the state of the film industry. And going back to the stuff of Cannes as well, the fact this has been screened and tested for the community way before ever for the public, for the press. Obviously, NDAs, they couldn't say anything until after it premiered at Cannes in May. But I find that so much more, not even professional, because it should be anyway, but Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor's the go-to example, right, of historical events done dreadfully, disgracefully. No doubt there are loads of others we can look at that have probably emerged. There's probably loads a year, if I'm being honest. I'm just struggling to think of another one that jumps to mind. And I think if you don't have the authenticity heading into it, I'll look at Oppenheimer as it's a bit different because it's science and not race and whatnot. But that's a scientist that was ousted by government, who took until this book came out in 2005 to really have, I don't want to say public opinion, that's wrong, but it took decades. And for us, we've got Alan Turing's probably one of our most prominent ones, who without him, the Allies lose a world war and he ends up in prison because he's gay. And he gets pardoned decades after he died too. So it's when you're doing films that can bring, Alan Turing is a great one because the pardon came because of the success of the film and the people that made the film being behind it. I think that's a massively important thing with these kinds of films. And again, Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon, I know is going to be doing as well as he can, which is better than 99.9% of filmmakers.
What I think it's probably going to lead to is, because it's been given this much exposure, you're probably going to get in the next 2 or 3 years a really high quality documentary on the events, which may tell a probably more accurate story and not have it kind of, because it's a non-fiction story, but the film is not non-fiction, if that makes sense. It is a fictionalized kind of retelling. And it focuses really
events. And the focus is essentially on one family. And there are dozens, if not hundreds, of people that were murdered across this decade of the infiltration, which is something I find astounding. And I know we'll talk about. I mean, if we head into direction, I don't want to jump into my direction with a cameo, but the Scorsese cameo at the end completely caught me off guard.
Did get a laugh from everyone in the cinema. Yeah. Everyone was pissing themselves, but
and at the start, it sort of made me wonder. I was like, okay. But then you realize the context of his cameo. We've got this. I know it's strange to jump in, but we've got this 3 hour, 20-minute build up of these atrocities, and then it's been reduced to a comedy radio show by the FBI internally, which I think is one of the best creative decisions I've seen in a film this year.
It's not a creative decision. I'm going to burst your bubble here. That radio show actually happened. That's
not surprising, because that is not surprising in the slightest. Because I did think it's very not American, but You think in 1950s, you think of them looking at cases decades on, FBI, look how great we are, look at what we did in the past. But to see that included in the film, all these people have spent hours with on the screen, and they're reduced to this person got away with it. One of my favorite parts of The Irishman, right, is every time I got introduced to a new gangster, freeze frame, white text, shot in the head, 1973. I loved that conscious creative decision, and we have that with this film's ending. But to bring it to a standstill, to drop the comedy act when Scorsese turns up to talk about what exactly happened to Molly in her later years, that's when the joke stops and you realize that you needed someone with gravitas, someone poignant. And I actually do think, and this might go down different ways to some, to have your director, one of the most respected directors in the world, who has done this film, it could be read as an ego trip, sure. But to me, that reads as something a bit more. That reads as an understanding of the scenario. It's not some A-list actor doing it for themselves. It's not somebody else. In fact, the director wants to talk about this individual person. I think that really sort of cemented the film. The last 5 minutes of this film. And I'm trying to avoid comparing to Oppenheimer, but when you have these incredible films, there are often scenes that you can jump at that can pinpoint that hit home. Oppenheimer is going to be the scene after the nuke with the school where, you know, you've got the noise and all that sort of stuff. It's a scene that I don't think anyone else does except the director. And in this case, I know we haven't really spoken about the direction, but to end the film with that, and then the modern day, the tribal dance with the song and the aesthetics as well, a very powerful way to end the film. And obviously the text also coming up in the native language rather than American.
No, I completely agree. It did catch everyone off guard and it did get a laugh out of everyone, but then the laughs kind of stopped of with the conclusion of it. And you do realize that the story has been not made a mockery of, but it's not being told correctly. I'm not saying that Scorsese is coming in and telling the story correctly, because we've obviously kind of heard that from the red carpet, it was one of the major criticisms of it was that it still wasn't their story. It's Scorsese kind of taking on board things and telling it for the masses.
He's adapting the book, isn't he? He's
adapting
the book, not real life.
He's adapting a book. He did go and consult, which is some directors wouldn't. That's all I'm going to say. Some directors wouldn't consult. Some directors would, you know, we always have the joke of, you know, Lily Gladstone's character could have been Scarlett Johansson kind of thing. Like other directors would have done that. They would have had maybe one or two characters who would have been Native American. But then past that, you know, it gets lazy. This film does have a lot of effort in it. It does feel like there's a lot of passion in behind it to make sure that it tells the story enough. It tells the story to a good enough level that you feel something at the end of it. And you definitely do feel something at the end of it. You get invested in the characters in this film, whether it's kind of, you know, hoping that, you know, Molly pulls through, or whether it's kind of really, really hoping that, you know, the villains of the story kind of end up dead or, you know, buried like the people that they killed or buried. You know, it's one of those where you wish so hard for those things, and that's kind of the passion and emotion that you get from this kind of film. And if we're moving on to the direction of this film, once again, it's just phenomenal. Just once again, just everything about it. I know a lot of the shots from the trailer I kind of looked at and went, oh, they're really, really well put together kind of shots. They look really cool and stuff like that. I can't wait to see it on screen. But from start to finish, this film is gorgeous, and the camera follows the characters so well, and it's all pieced together just expertly. I mean, it's Scorsese. We know exactly what he's going to give and get. He makes a Western feel like a gangster film, and that's exactly what this ends up being. It's just another masterpiece along his many masterpieces that he's put together. And like we said, like he's able to kind of evoke emotion from the audience. He's able to get the audience kind of, you know, feeling these emotions for these characters that we've only just been introduced to. So, you know, retelling history in that way and making it kind of not fully glitz and glamorized in a similar way to Baz Luhrmann kind of does his style and stuff like that, but enough kind of excitement thrown in there that it isn't just a historical retelling. It makes you feel like you're actually there. It makes the characters feel more real and everything like that.
Yeah, and this is kind of what I thought heading in on paper. You know, everyone says, "Oh, it's great," and I'm not here to slag off people I respect, but sometimes films get overhyped, and it does happen at festivals. I'm not saying this because you're at London, but TIFF, Cannes, Venice, London, Oh God, there's one of the other big ones I've forgotten. Sundance in January. I actually think Sundance is massively underrated, and it's very highly rated. But I did wonder, I was like, is this just going to be like another one of those bubble film Twitter moments where film Twitter's like, this is the best thing we've ever seen since sliced bread, and they say it 10 times in a week. But there's something different this night. I'd avoided the trailers until they came on, at a cinema or something. So I didn't want to see too much. I was sold on the day this was announced. I was sold when the cast kept coming on board. And what I found remarkable, the direction of this film, is how it was able to cover the decades that this was going on. That we don't just meet Leonardo DiCaprio, fall in love on the spot. Yeah, and I don't want to be all different ages. Good, he's done this with Goodfellas. He's done this with The Irishman. He's done this across the board, across his career. Raging Bull, another perfect example. And I trust Scorsese making this film. What I was floored by was the patient approach to the film. I know it's got a 3-hour, 20-minute runtime. I know people have had issues with the runtime, and I do get that. I know you spoke about intermissions. I know that I think View in the UK are doing intermissions, but nobody else is. Or some View screens are, some aren't, which is very weird. I definitely agree with you to the logic that the concept of an intermission, it's not a bad choice to have. Show it 4 times a day, two intermissions, 2 not. In my headspace, I'm fine to continue without it, but what works with Scorsese is always the teams he brings on board. And we'll talk about like cinematography, editing as well, but he surrounds himself with the best available, the people that know how he operates, the people that knows how he functions. You see interviews of him when he's talking about direction. He isn't, it sounds like a criticism of Spielberg. He's not talking about like having 8 different cameras and picking the best shots that they can get on the day. He is so actively involved in the filmmaking process, which is why I sort of commend it as well, especially with the age he is now and him sort of saying, I've only got 1 or 2 films left in me. You're doing this in the 80s and you've only got 1 or 2 left in you. It's remarkable that he's able to make a film this quality. And I think where I'm kind of out of the direction is I don't have issues with it per se. I've got 1 or 2 issues with the film. And I don't think that's the direction of what I think that's the film itself. But it's tricky to talk about because we're doing the Fincher retrospective, so we've been able to see his filmography and how he's essentially a perfectionist. That everything he does, it's got to be done to the exact standard he needs it to be. With Scorsese, we know on set he allows a bit of improv. We know he can do drama films, he can do gangster films, he can do historical films, he can do... Right, he's done a lot of religious films, and this next one might be, I think, as well. But I wasn't really sure what to expect heading into this, but I didn't expect to be so invested so quickly. When the opening scene is of people being sort of murdered, we kind of knew the film's going to be about that. But you're seeing this horrific impact from the get-go. And in my head, I was thinking, okay, they're going to be not doing this for 3 hours, but what is this runtime going to cover? Because there's a lot. And obviously, without the knowledge firsthand, I can say, yes, this absolutely nailed it. Talking about the build-up, talking about the murders, and then the FBI's involvement, you kind of need all 3 to compensate the story. You can't just have 1 or 2. Can't just have the FBI coming in. You need to set up them coming in. And I think the choice to isolate the family, to talk with William Hale's conviction's a big part of this, which is De Niro's performance. And I think if you were talking, and this is where the representation thing comes into, which is what I'm curious of other people. If you were doing other families away from Molly's, I think you'd struggle with the runtime. Because then there might be not overlaps, but we're focusing on one family being infiltrated, and exposed, and murdered.
It's not just focusing on one family; it's focusing
on a community.
It's focusing on the key family almost, the linchpin of the entire kind of case.
It's just one of them. It's what they call it. They're one of like the original Assange families. So you take into account there are more.
I know it's one of them, but from the extra research I did, everything kind of draws back to Molly King. If that makes sense. So Molly's family, because he was the nephew of William King Hale, and he was the one committing the most of the atrocities and kind of the person behind it all. Molly was kind of the gateway and the linchpin of the entire case. And the fact that she was being poisoned and survived, she ends up being not the hero of the story, but more of kind of the central focus of the story. And I know that in this film, and one of the major criticisms that you will give, I will give as well, is that we do have her not appear for a large portion of the film. And I'd love for it to focus on her more, because we do miss kind of Lily Gladstone's acting. We miss kind of her character in this film at certain points, because she brings heart to the film. She brings something for us to root for. She brings kind of something for us to try and connect to. But she is apparently, from the things I've seen so far, she is kind of the main kind of area of not just kind of the murders themselves, but also kind of how they were able to stop and how they're able to kind of put an end to it.
Yeah, and I think as well, in line with what you're saying, which I agree with, if you don't cover those angles of her life, even her first marriage to an extent which they speak about, you'd be losing something, because we're building up this family. We're building up not just the importance of this tribal family, one of the original Osage families, but to take into account the siblings we spend time with, the other family members, then to take into account Ernest's side of the uncle, that it's not some big twist like, oh, look at them, they were evil the whole time. We've known that from the get-go. These people are there for one thing only, to take the money. They want these rights. Opening montage again, we're seeing the white American man kill someone and take the baby away, because he's now inherited that family fortune, which is very, very real and probably still happens to this day to a lesser extent, but still happens to this day. And I just think it was a really unique scenario to be in. And kind of what you mentioned earlier, that no doubt with further attention this will take to the murders, anything could happen in the next few years. Historical stuff, historical studies, documentaries, you name it. I'd imagine there will be a lot more people looking into stuff like this now, which is, I always think, is a great thing for when film is able to do that. And where I kind of sit with the storytelling angle, I mean, I don't mind talking about the stuff we enjoy, like with Molly either. You mentioned that we spend time, Molly, we see her built up. I think Lily Gladstone gives the best performance in this film. And
which for an actress who isn't well known, hasn't been in many things, and when being asked to do this film, she was going through what she considered to be like a dry spell, like nothing really coming up, not doing any performances that were of any note. To come out and be the lead runner, I mean, people were saying it going into the film, people were saying it coming out of the film. She's got lead actress nailed already. No one's going to touch her on it. Is fascinating.
I mean, I don't know about that, just because I've not seen the others, but the big contention was that they'd submitted it for actress, not for supporting, which people spoke about. And again, it's early doing Oscar talk, but to me, what that shows is that the production, the director, and the people involved are committed to saying she is the lead actress in this film, and she holds her own against Leonardo DiCaprio. She holds her own against Robert De Niro. As you mentioned, for someone that isn't a household name, for someone that hasn't got the acting pedigree, that's disgraceful. But for somebody that is a newer face on the scene, I guess we could say. And Scorsese loves switching up his lead women. Look at Margot Robbie with her breakthrough in Wolf of Wall Street. He, of course, had, before Kick-Ass, she was in Hugo. He very much has up-and-coming actors take the lead roles in his films. Chloe Grace Moretz. And I always find it really interesting how again, it's easy to look at De Niro and DiCaprio and say he always goes back to them. He does. This is the 10th and 6th film with them both. But it's so interesting what he's able to do with his other actors. And I think Lily Gladstone steals this film. And I think because of the presence she has, she's severely missed. And that's something I have an issue with. And I think it's the structure of the film. It's not necessarily the script, the direction, but we miss something by just taking this character and saying she's ill. We know she's being poisoned. We know they're trying to, get rid of her for the money. But some of the best moments were just her talking with her sisters in scenes before they get married, when you've got the family saying, they're all here for our money, all of this. I found it really interesting getting more of that side of things. And I think once, obviously, we lose the rest of the siblings, naturally that conversation is not going to happen as much. But I feel like the actual Osage are missed in this. And again, I don't know the story enough to be able to, they should come and hear that. I'm not into sort of trying to do corrections, but I feel like structurally my issue is that there's something missing with Molly towards the end, because when she comes back into it, it's a pretty great moment. And the ending scenes with her, what we get from her, obviously having to bury her own child, but leaving Leo at the table asking this question. She absolutely has him in this film. She has his number. She's the best performance in this film. But there's something missing, and I can't quite
Do you feel like between the book adaptation, which is all about the FBI, and this adaptation, which is all about villainizing the people behind it, we have missed kind of the actual Assange side of the story, if that makes sense?
I think so, to a point. I think sounds really dumb.
We get a lot of the runtime dedicated to kind of showing off the Assange nation, showing off, you know, that side of things, their lifestyle, kind of how they lived, how they came into the wealth, how it was slowly taken away from them. But we spend most of the film, and I guess this is where the debate comes in, because Lily Gladstone's amazing in the film, phenomenal, whatever, but she's not in the film for a ridiculously long amount of time. That time is soaked up by Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro. It's you know, it's soaked up by the villains of it and trying to kind of their scheming ways, and you know, the conflict in Leo's character of kind of, you know, actually loving his wife but also wanting to take everything from her, and that kind of side of things is played off more, and a lot of the runtime is dedicated to that, and less runtime is dedicated to, you know, the actual nation and kind of how they're dealing with the deaths and everything like that.
The scene I jumped to is when Jesse Plemons meets with the tribe. It's almost funny, and it shouldn't be, but it's like, I'm here to look at the murders. Like, yeah, we contacted you like years ago. We've known about this has happened. Now we're older, and now we can't fight. We'd have killed them all, blah, blah, blah. That scene, it's almost played for laughs. Now, again, there's 15 people in my screening. I didn't laugh loud. It's not a comedy scene. But there's some self-awareness I found in there. Like, yeah, we just didn't do anything with these guys for a while, and now we're back to them too. When the film opens and begins with them, closes with them, and they disappear as well. So it's just something, and I wonder that's where again, I apologize, I don't have the name of the person that spoke at that red carpet. He actually has a cameo in the film as well. I just felt like there's something missing, and you're right, because this is called Killers of the Flower Moon. This is about the people that did this. This is about the murders. I don't mind it focusing more on De Niro and DiCaprio, and kind of the other structural criticism I have is that, I don't want to be boring, say De Niro is the actual villain of the film. It's not anything in that sense, but the character of Ernest, I've got to pick the words carefully. It's a very good performance from Leo. It feels like quite a two-dimensional character for Leonardo DiCaprio standards. Now, I love Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's one of my favorite performances. Now, of course, he has the same accent, so it is hard to not look at that. But we know this character, this person's been, film perspective, been played by his uncle the whole time, right? Go get close to this one. Go do this. Go do this. You know, do this. And he's such an idiot in it. Now, again, I don't know the real life side of things, which is what I'd be really intrigued to learn more about. Was this just an idiot who was taken advantage of by his uncle, or is he as sinister? Because to me, to marry into that family, to assist your uncle with that stuff, nobody's that thick just to go along with it when he's admitting he likes the money too. To be involved in the murders of the sister and the in-laws, I just think something's off about the character of.
I get a feeling. Here's the thing. I get a feeling that Byron, the character played by Scott Shepherd in this film, is a more intelligent character in the film, if that makes sense.
He's way more sinister, and not
way more sinister, way more intelligent. But the big thing that I came back to, and it's one of the things that I immediately kind of my ears pricked up when I was watching it. So I was watching this documentary earlier on this, and apparently William King Hale, when he was working on a farm after he'd finished his jail period, had said, if only that boy had kept his damn mouth shut. And I know they say that in the radio play at the end. That's a direct quote. So I think genuinely Ernest was a little bit dumb. And I think that William didn't really care about him at all. And De Niro's character plays off so well, kind of the loving uncle who doesn't actually love you at all and kind of manipulates and forces things. And I actually really enjoyed Leo's performance purely out of the fact that it was kind of, you know, conflicted, whether it's conflicting, whether he understands what's fully going on or whether he really plays into it or whether he actually loves, you know, Molly as a character. I think it's not two-dimensional. I think there's so many things going into it. And I think even if it was two-dimensional in that fact of like, he's playing along with kind of the dumb things and he's actually being really sinister towards his wife, he plays it so well that you actually do sometimes feel kind of that sense of innocence breaking through and that sense of actual loving and heavy amounts of confliction in there. It's not the most complex character he's ever played, far from it, but I do think it's a little bit more complex than we should kind of give it credit.
Yeah, no, I do get that, and it just made me curious. Is that obviously when we know that Leo was originally, in the role for Jesse Plemons,
yes.
and I'm sat there thinking that would be not just a very different film, but I'd be so curious to see who they might have originally looked at for a character such as Ernest, because as you kind of said there with Leo, right? It's not the most complex character, and not every character has to be complex. I remember
absolutely
when we did the Titanic review. He spoke to James Cameron and was like, I want him to be this. James Cameron's like, you just need to basically fucking realize that you're playing this character that I've created. It's not complex. You're a love interest. Like, shut up. That's basically the James Cameron way of telling him that. And I think that heading into this where Cameron's, I did think, is this Leo's first film since Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? I was like, no, of course, Don't Look Up happened, unfortunately for us all. But it is interesting that he does take on this role. And I do think, as you said, his performance is phenomenal. I can't take anything from his performance. I just think he's by far, I think, doing the best with what he's working with. And as you said, the moment in which he sort of finds out he's lost his son, the whole sequence that follows after. Because I don't want to say he has a redemption. He has no redemption. And I love the fact
zero redemption at all. And I'm glad of it. I love
that we got the moment where it sort of says, he ended up in a trailer park with his brother until like the 40s or 50s when they died. Anyway, it's like, okay, I like that. That's the thing they should have. And as I said, the focus is on Molly for that final scene. And yeah, it's interesting. And I do think, and I don't know if this happens often. I think Leo's overshadowed. Like simple as, and it's not a criticism of him at all. But you've got Lily Gladstone who steals it, and then I want to talk about Robert De Niro playing William King Hale.
Very quickly before we move on, we move on, I do want to kind of throw in a comment as well on top of the fact that Leo's role. So originally, the role of Jesse Plemons' character Tom White, the head of the FBI agent at the time, was originally written for Leo. Leo was meant to play that character. They wrote the character for Leo. And he turned around and said, no, I want to be Ernest. I want to bring that character to life, which I find absolutely fascinating. I just wanted to reiterate and also just, bring attention to that point before we move on to DiCaprio.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
DiCaprio,
and I think,
De Niro.
I mean, just Jesse Plemons, really quickly. Jesse Plemons is one of the most underrated actors. I don't think anyone... He's not a name that's known by the general public. He's not ever
think of him as an underrated character, go watch Game Night. He's so good in that. He's so good in that.
I think because he doesn't do many roles, he's not done the big blockbusters. I do think some people feel... I don't want to say he's... I don't think he's underrated. I think he's an unbelievable actor. We just don't see him in enough, which is...
He's come a long way. He's come a long way from being called Meth Damon from when he was in Breaking Bad.
Yeah. I mean, he was in The Irishman, a very small role in The Irishman, and then he ended up in this too. So it's something. I've just got a quick comment about RJ.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I'm so glad to see the movie. It's such a good movie, and I didn't feel the 3 hour 50-minute runtime interesting. We'll talk about the runtime later. But I'm glad you didn't feel it as well. But yeah, Robert De Niro, one of, as far as I'm concerned, one of the greatest actors of all time.
Yeah.
One of my favorite actors of all time. It's tricky talking to Niro because I watched The Irishman recently, and I think The Irishman is an incredible film that is not spoken about, probably because of Netflix, because of no wide release, and it's overshadowed by the whole CGI de-aging discussions, which is understandable. De Niro is always at his best with Scorsese. There is no denying that. You look at the work they've done with each other. You can look at, obviously, the work the pair of them have done without the other. Yes, it's phenomenal, but I think they bring out the best of themselves. They're two of the best ever in their own field, respectively. But I did not go into this expecting De Niro to have as much screen time as he did. Obviously, I don't want to say it's like someone compared him on Twitter a lot to Hug and Bear from Toy Story, which I sort of get, and I kind of love that analogy because he sort of is.
This film's darker than that film. I want to point.
Yeah,
out.
no, I know. But I saw that, and I can't just unhear the not say from that now. But I don't want to say De Niro's become a parody of himself because that's massively disrespectful. No. But he's, rather than sort of, without criticizing finances, rather than doing private signings and conventions, he's been doing Warburton's adverts, and dreadful comedies, which snap out of that. But it reminds us why he's one of the best. That he's delivering performances like this 50 years into working with Scorsese. They've known each other since they were younger as well, like before they were doing films. And I don't have the words to cover his performance because we know he's playing this sinister character, the nice sort of cuddly the old grandparent you can call upon. He's so good at being so swami, and he doesn't hide. In this performance, he's not hiding the fact he's a dreadful person, but he just has everybody sort of pulling strings. It's like, you can do this robbery at 8:00 tonight. Goes next person. By the way, I think heads up this robbery comes just 8. He's not ever hiding. He's not hiding in plain sight. Everyone knows he's around it, but he knows he's untouchable by default, that he's going to get away with it, which is why the conviction side of things is so interesting for that final hour. And the fear he has knowing that if this one person wants to get you, he's gonna succeed in getting you. And I think to get this out of De Niro, again, I just didn't expect it. Because you go into this film, you think Leonardo DiCaprio in the lead role, really you think it's going to be the Leo show. And I think Robert De Niro outshines DiCaprio. I say as well, not in like a competitive manner. I think Lily Gladstone takes this film, but De Niro, I just didn't expect to get this out of him. And then you get other people pop up in price, like John Lithgow for like 3 scenes, who's amazing. But your thoughts on De Niro?
I was going to say, we'll talk about the ensemble in a minute, because the ensemble in this film is just, it's an all-time ensemble. If there was you've got this year, I was going to say,
this
is the year where like you've got 3 massive ensemble films that all could, easily take that if it ever became an Oscar. But
SAD has it. If they'll actually have a ceremony.
Course, that's going to be really interesting to see which one wins it. No, De Niro in this film is frightening, and I don't really say that often about kind of his character roles, especially in recent times. I got a little bit of fear out of his character in The Irishman, but this one takes on a whole new kind of level of evil. It's that kind of almost so much this mustache twirling kind of levels of evil, but you actually kind of see the dirty work that he does behind it. It's fully manipulating, it's fully engrossing. He's able to just, pull that character's all of the evilness and wickedness behind all the dirty deeds and kind of put it on screen and put it in a lovely little package that's, manageable at first, but then very gently starts to begin to boil over. He is a phenomenal actor, one of the greatest of all time. I'm glad that he's still kind of doing work with Scorsese, because I personally think that his best work has been with Scorsese. But yeah, this is a performance that will go down as one of his best in his career. I know that he isn't the best actor in this film, but I genuinely think people will look back on this character and go, wow, he was absolutely frightening in this film. With his portrayal of it, with his lovely smile kind of followed up by that kind of stern look he gives DiCaprio, making DiCaprio
it's
look
the glasses and his goggles. I kept not laughing out loud, but I just loved how some actors and their ego, you can't put glasses on me, you can't put goggles on me. Not that you look stupid, but there are actors that have clauses saying you can't punch me more than 3 times or something ridiculous. And I like that, again, De Niro and Scorsese bring out the best of each other. I think
everyone in this film, if we are going to talk about just the ensemble of everyone together, brings out the best in everyone. Because when you look at it, Leo acting scared is because, De Niro is a scary character.
He knows what he's capable of.
Yeah,
he says
100%.
it at the start of the film. He says exactly the film. I know what you're capable of.
Yeah, exactly. And then with Lily Gladstone, she feeds off both of them and plays it off as this kind of nothing can get to me, but then it starts to get to her kind of levels of torture. All of the lead actors in this film and everyone kind of involved in the film all the way down feeds off each other, and it all works really, really well because of that.
Can I ask you, right?
Yeah.
So again, not to talk about Twitter as a whole. I know you don't really use Twitter, so you don't know how it functions, but
I'm not big on Twitter. No.
Someone getting a lot of criticism is Brendan Fraser in this film. Now, he's in 3 scenes. But yes, the opening scene is him shouting and screaming, which I thought was good. But people have been criticizing him in this. I don't have a problem with his performance. I know he came on board very last minute. It had already been filming. He just wrapped on The Whale, and he was then added into this, which is why there was so much more excitement heading into his comeback, because he'd done 3 projects in a row before The Whale came out. Obviously, Batgirl cancelled, ridiculous. But the ensemble, I mentioned John Lithgow pops up for a couple of scenes. Jesse Plemons, yes, it's a supporting role. I know he's more of the final act. The cast that turn up, I absolutely adore them. And even some of it's a really dreadful comparison to like Red Dead Redemption, but when you've got them like laying the traps of dynamite and stuff like that, it reminds me of something like out of a game in a, again, like authenticity factor of seeing this done on a proper budget in the right environments, landscapes. I think the ensemble is pretty great. Again, I forgot his name. You mentioned him, plays Leo's brother in it. Scott Shepherd. I mean, okay, we had The Last of Us this year, and he's popped up in a lot of stuff, but we know how sinister a performance he can give, and I think he's great in this. He's cold, he's calculated.
He's very good in it.
One of the most haunting scenes of the film is the flashback to when they show the sister being killed. It's not killing Molly's sister that's scary, it's him coming home and having Molly putting the pillow under his head and tucking him up for the night, knowing he's just murdered her sister. That is when I go back to this direction thing. Scorsese waited hours to give us this moment. And it is horrifying because we now know the context of it. Yes. And again, it all comes part and parcel with the direction. And I can see why every actor under the sun wanted to be in this as well. It's a chance to be in a Scorsese film, this Scorsese film. And, you know, funded by Apple isn't. Funded by Apple's gravitas to me. Funded by Netflix, not so much anymore. I don't think it really was to begin with, if I'm being really honest with you. What are the two biggest Netflix films on paper? Glass Onion and The Irishman. They've been the two biggest Netflix films in terms of not budget by default, but in terms of like popularity, success, like respect within industry. And they're both two films that everyone said this should be released properly at cinemas. And it's exactly what we've been able to get with Killers of the Flower Moon.
Yeah, exactly.
I know I spoke about ensemble.
Yeah, no, I want to see these questions that people are bringing up. Yeah,
right. We'll stick with RJ first. I feel like they're reviving the adult drama. I feel like intermissions are necessary for certain films based on the pacing and genres. I agree to both of those. I think the audiences that go to cinema are evolving somewhat. People, I can't speak for a demographic, but we can see declines of certain genres that were very, very successful for long periods of time. Less is more, and the quantity has started to now affect the quality. But also, like anything, there's no evolution to the storytelling. So, I feel like audiences are waiting. Like, Top Gun Maverick, okay, it's a 30+ year sequel. It was very good. Everyone went back because they had to see it on the big screen. That was the same way. You had to see it on the big screen. It wasn't going to be around for you to watch home. Barbie, one of the biggest event films of the year. Go and wear pink. Go with your friends. Go with your family. Yes, it's more of a comedy drama, but there you can speak to dozens of people who talk about how emotional it was for them, the impact it had on them, parents, grandparents talking about their Barbies as a kid. That was a big film, and that was not a stereotypical film. Oppenheimer, a 3-hour film, partially black and white, about the man that built the nuclear bomb and doesn't show it go off in Japan. One of the tensest films of the year, and it's people in boardrooms for half an hour. So it's. I feel like it is changing somewhat. I think it's a good thing. What I hope primarily is that these dramas that we're going to see, we have directors, we have writers coming on board who are committed to telling those stories. We've mentioned Oppenheimer a lot tonight. I know it's very current still. You have Nolan talking about all the research he did, you know, everything from, I mean, the book it's based off is like 700 pages by default. You've got Cillian Murphy, who apparently struggled with the responsibility of telling Oppenheimer on set, wouldn't socialize with RDJ or any of the others. So it's really interesting that I do think audiences want these films. And we'll do the runtime conversation later, but the adult drama it's what I said earlier. If you could do a $200 million superhero film, why not do a $200 million drama? Exactly. The studios have money to spend on these films. The blockbusters are what should be funding the other films, not just funding themselves to pocket. And that's why we have boards people upstairs calling the shots, not producers, not directors. Look at the studio heads. None of them have a background in film heading into these strikes, except for, oh God, I forgot his name, the Disney CEO, Iger, who's probably just killed his political motivations by going back to Disney, now having all these strikes under his belt. So I agree. So that's a very long-winded way of answering that.
Yes, no, of course. And from at least my kind of point of view and perspective, there's always going to be a market for people wanting to go and see these kind of films. It's maybe coming out of the pandemic, people want something different. People are starting to go off the kind of quick form, instant action kind of films. People want an actual story behind it. People want to learn more about the world. People want to go out and explore things. And when people explore through cinema, you get these longer form, adult-based dramas. And I think there will always be a market for it. We'll always get a good amount each year. It's whether we get a good quality to come with it. And when these big directors, these auteurs are coming in and doing this style of film, this kind of thing, talking about this topic, you are going to pull in audiences. It's their job to. And it'll continue. I think it's not a revival. It's more of returning to the status quo, if anything.
It shouldn't... A director shouldn't be told, you can do Killers of the Flower Moon for 20 mil. And that's the problem is...
Or you can do Killers of the Flower Moon, but you have to do this film for us first.
Yeah, and that's where we are. And all the issues in Hollywood right now do stem on the productions. And people can talk about audiences don't want this. As Tayte said, they'll turn it. They will. They turn it for Barbie. Oppenheimer, $100 million film, gross $950 million, unheard of, unparamounted. But we've got a couple more. We've got a couple of Brendan Fraser comments. We'll do the intermission one just after.
Let's bring up the end of
RJ distracted him. I feel like it worked. It came across as comedic, but I don't think that was the intent. I did laugh at his intro, I'm not going to lie. I thought Fraser stood up amongst great actors, but not in a good way. I can see that as well.
I want to point out that his performance in The Whale was phenomenal and fully deserving of the best actor of that year. And I know that people have criticised him for that performance.
I was not. I have a lot of issues with The Whale anyway, like not just for him. I love Brendan Fraser.
I like.
There's a photo of him.
Therefore,
that's a signed photo. I don't just have a random George Jungle.
No, he does stand out in the scenes, but he's not in the film for very long. So it ends up. I don't even know if you could count it as a proper full-on performance. It's more of kind of a cameo.
It's an ensemble role, isn't it?
It doesn't detract away from the film, and that's why I'm okay with it. It doesn't immediately like ruin everything that's come before it in the film. Like, that isn't the focus. If the focus of the film is on how good Brendan Fraser's performance is, or if you're being distracted by Brendan Fraser's 2 or 3 minutes in the film, then I don't think
it's like Casey Affleck and Oppenheimer, right? You bring in this name. I mean, I know there's a lot of names, but they've got like 2 scenes to work with. Go have that impact. Dave, I love the way this just didn't work for me, and I get that too. Last one. Should studios bring intermissions from films? Yes. I agree and disagree.
If a film's over a certain amount of time, 100% yes. And the reason why is because it used to happen in the olden days. It used to break up the film. It used to give people time to kind of reset themselves so they could fully focus on the film into the latter parts. Especially in this age where, for a lot of people, we want things instant. We get 1-day delivery from Amazon and various different things. We get streaming to our homes onto our computers so we can watch films on the go, whether we're on a train or anything like that. So we can take our own intermissions whenever we want to, if we need to, if we do get distracted. I think for films that are this long, there are natural breaks where you can go, okay, absorb the information you've taken in from the first half, come back in like 5-10 minutes, and then we'll continue with the story. And I don't think it'll take you out of the story at all. I think what it does is it gives you time to absorb a bit of the information, get yourself comfortable for the second half so you can fully experience it in the best way possible and enjoy it in the best way possible. I also understand the counter-argument of full immersion, but certain films, Scorsese seems to be a serial offender of this, because The Irishman, when I watched it on Netflix, I needed to do it in parts. I couldn't do it in one go. And with this film, I did manage to watch it in one go, but my legs were numb at the end of it. I fully enjoyed it. I really, really liked it. But I wish that there was a 5-10 intermission where I could just stand up, stretch my legs, whether I left the cinema screaming or not, whether I needed to go to the toilet or not, doesn't matter. Just, reset myself for the second half of the film.
Yeah, I'm where I kind of stem is I've only ever watched one film with intermission, 2001: Space Odyssey. Despised the intermission. They didn't advertise it as having one. It just faded to black, and there was a countdown of like 10 minutes. It
depends on how they present the intermission as well, I want to say.
Not even that. I just my mindset for it is, if a film's over a certain length, like 3D and 2D, optional screening. This one will have an intermission of 10 minutes. This one will not. That's been approved by the director with a placement in. I'm thinking Lord of the Rings Extended Edition, where the disc just mid-fight swap disc, please, whilst a troll's having a fight. If there's a natural place to do it, I've got no issue with a 10-minute one by choice of the audience. If you've chosen to watch a 3.5-hour film with a 10-minute intermission, great. me, I want to go in start to finish. I can do it. So I've got no issue if it was. I mean, like I said, I know that with you in the UK, he's done it and given it a go. But I would be curious about other films. And then I would also then follow up and say, if you're doing it for this, you got to do it for Avengers. You got to do it for Avatar. Don't pick and choose. But for me, I've got with the whole running time. I've got no issue with the running time, but every single person's going to be different. Again, a 3.5-hour film plus 25 minutes adverts. I had to plot out the day to cut this in. If this had been a weekend, it'd be a bit trickier. Luckily, it was a Thursday night. I got nothing on. And just got a bit comment, Dave. I had a constant finish in the final 40, distracting, but that's people are starting on. Yeah, and that says more about the modern day audiences too, which is equally as much a problem. But I think that covers a lot of the comments. Let's dip back. We spoke about the cast. We spoke about the direction. Let's talk the score. So Robbie Robertson, his final score has worked with Scorsese for many projects in the past. Lead guitarist for Bob Dylan. Passed away in August of this year, so this is his final project. I thought the soundtrack was, in sense of not a compartment piece. What's the right term? For the function of it, okay, the great soundtrack debate. I remember we had this on Dunkirk, but I don't think it was you who I was arguing with. I was once told that it's not a good soundtrack because you can't listen to it in your spare time, to which I think is the most ridiculous opinion I've ever heard about film. Soundtrack's there to compensate the moving image, to compensate the tone, the environment, everything, you name it. A good soundtrack will do all of those things. There's something about the soundtrack where I've not listened to it, and I probably won't listen to it, but it felt very immersive. I mentioned Red Dead Redemption to you. It has that sort of, again, right, 1910s, 1920s, that it's not I don't know what you called popular music back then, but it's string instruments. It's what you'd see in the small sort of shanty towns, and it's used to build tension throughout, which I really enjoyed. I thought it was a very good score to compensate the film. I'm not the best at alleviate and talk about scores, but there was one person in my screening who did keep humming the score whilst it was happening on screen, which was really annoying, but kind of funny that he just knew how it was going to go. But again, it's that traditional, right, cowboy type.
Yeah,
type
it's Western orchestral. It's kind of, it's exactly what you expect from, the Oregon Trail kind of crossing and everything that kind of goes along with that kind of style of film. It fits to the era. It plays into the film really well. There are certain moments in the film where they use kind of influences from the Native American kind of instruments and Native American kind of music and tribal dances and various different things, and it cuts in really, really well against what I guess is kind of the Western kind of progress. Not even Western because they're all Western, but the kind of the white man's progress coming into their land and kind of overtaking, and that traditional music slowly fades out as the film goes on, and it only kind of comes back at the very final scene, kind of with them kind of doing their ceremony. It's really well put together. I really enjoyed it. I haven't listened to it since watching the film, but it definitely stuck with me whilst watching the film and after the film as well. It was one of the big things I came away from thinking, wow, that was a really, really good score. That was a really, really good soundtrack. And it is a shame that Robbie Robertson, he passed away this year before the film was released. I do hope that he was able to at least see a copy of the film with kind of,
Oh, it's been ready for a while. He would have seen it, no doubt.
So, and we'll talk about it a little bit further on, but he probably will get a posthumous nomination for kind of best score as part of the Oscars. So,
No, I agree. I think it will be nominated for that, and it shouldn't. Kind of talking that, we're going to talk the Oscars. No, this is weird. We
need to list these and write these down because realistically,
I don't want to make it a prediction show. That's my fear, but we haven't actually planned this. I guess we should say, but
I'm just going to pull up a list of Oscar categories and go yes, no, and everything like that.
This is going to be one of the heavy hitters at the Oscars next year. There's absolutely no doubt. Again, I've not seen all the films. I know you've seen a couple more from being at the festival. A year ago, it was billed as Scorsese versus Spielberg for the oldies. And obviously, they delayed Killers to this year. It wasn't ready for award season last year, which is why it premiered at Cannes. So it was obviously clearly ready very, very soon after the award season.
I said this after coming out of the film because we had this discussion coming out of the cinema. If this film was last year, then everything.
Oh,
Everywhere
it would have
not,
swept.
It wouldn't have won.
Yeah,
Everything Everywhere would not have won Best Picture. This would have won.
And the talk for this year originally was Denny versus Christopher Nolan, which was going to be Dune versus Oppenheimer. Now, I don't want to sit here and do predictions because it's October. There's so many of the films coming out, but I'm very safe in my head of saying this is going to probably be one of those kind of films that gets like 10, 11 nominations and a couple of wins.
I could see that.
I don't want to go for every category just because they haven't even started the long list. They've only just started for your considerations, but this is going to do very well. And it's not just about like Scorsese didn't make this film and say, yeah, I can win Best Director from making this film. He's come on board because he wants to tell the story. But when it gets to award season, I like to see films within the industry being rewarded with recognition, which is what the Oscars should be the recognition for the work that's been done. And this is a film that exemplifies why it should be one of the heavyweights heading into a big award season. I do still think the narratives point towards Oppenheimer sweeping still, which I get. I'm going to be biased.
Here's the thing, though. I could see this matching Oppenheimer for its nominations.
And that's where I'm coming from. There's always 2 or 3 films with like 10 plus, but I think they'll be looking at the year. They'll be saying, okay, it's Nolan's time. It's Oppenheimer. It made $950 million off a $100 million budget. It did it next to Barbie. It'll be Cillian in the lead role. I think, again, I don't want to. It's too early for me, but I think it's Oppenheimer's year, and I didn't think it that aggressively before I saw Oppenheimer. And I don't want to compare the two because it's like comparing, to like completely different films, but they're going to get compared because they're both 3 hours long. I want this to do well. And again, the one thing I wanted to ask you was about Lily Gladstone, which is why I put Oscar's question mark, because again, I love the fact they've cemented her and said, we're going to put you in for lead actress, because people that are really big on Oscars, certain films, certain studios will say, sorry, Lily, we know you're our lead actress for this film. We know you're the leading actress. We know you're probably going to get a nomination for lead actress, but I think if we put you as supporting actress, you're going to sweep and win. I have incredible respect them putting her for lead actress, which is what it should be, rather than have an easy win. And I don't want to even compare it to too early to say easy win, but I'm looking back to Fabelmans last year when Michelle Williams was put in for leading actress when people were complaining that she'd have won if she was supporting. Well, it doesn't matter.
If she's the leading actress in the film, if she's got enough influence in the film to be the leading actress, then you should be the leading actress. And this would have been a disservice to Lily Gladstone's performance if she went into the supporting actress category. And
that's where I am with it.
You could absolutely argue that in this film, you could say De Niro up for supporting actor because he is supporting cast. This film is Leo and Lily, and I mean, even I would throw the hat in of an outside chance for we've just been talking about him a lot, Scott Shepherd, because I think his performance in the film is any other year would be considered to be one of the best supporting actor performances. It's because he comes up against De Niro. I think 3 are locked in right now, which is for supporting actor, which is Ryan Gosling, Robert Downey Jr. and Robert De Niro. Those 3 are in. I do think Downey Jr. is going to get his career Oscar. Not a problem. Unbelievable performance. And they don't do comedy Oscars. Ryan Gosling, who's amazing. But again, it's going to be interesting to see this over the coming months. And what I'm really curious with is how Apple's the first streaming service to win Best Film. People will forget the code to win Best Film, but they beat Netflix to it after Netflix's many years of trying first, which is still really funny. Just like as a side piece. But if I'm Tim Cook and I'm looking at the Apple film division, does Apple need a film to be a box office hit? Does Apple need $1 billion film? No, not really.
They're going to get one. If they want to make commercial films, they will
at this point. And I know that Amazon's
want to fund and also a film.
Here's the thing: I feel like Amazon's going to go down the same path. I mean, they kind of have anyway, but they're going to start. They have enough money to make good production films. Same with Apple, but Netflix struggles and always will struggle, because they have nothing else to back up their service. It's just them. It's them alone. And that's what's going to cause, their downfall's been pitched for a while now. They're raising their prices in the UK and everything like that. I think they're raising their prices everywhere. But anyway, they've got nothing to fall back on, whereas the other things, you know, they can take risks on projects like this. And it's crazy to say that a Scorsese film with Leonardo DiCaprio, Robert De Niro is a risk. But realistically, in this film climate, until, you know, people go back to the cinemas and stuff like that, it would be considered a financial risk in the first place. Whether it's a financial risk that pays off or not, I feel like it's going to be a success from awards and acclaim, and people are going to, you know, keep on going back to Apple to watch this film whilst it's available there.
Yeah, and Apple's dominated with TV the last couple of years. They've absolutely smashed it out of the park, and I do think for film they are doing. I mean, we've got the Brad Pitt film's going to be mega for them next year. The F1 film, well, I say next year, whether it releases with the strikes, whatnot. I know they've still been shooting at the tracks, but it is interesting Apple's approach, because they kind of don't need the money, which is why in my head I'm like they can afford to fund the auto. Christopher Nolan almost made Oppenheimer with Apple. I can't remember we spoke about this earlier this year, but he went with Universal's, worked wonders for him. And I think he still, if they were both offering him the same deals, he's probably gone to Universal on the basis that Universal, a Universal traditional film shoot, not streaming service. And I think Apple are one of the big boys that you can't take off the table. They're not overfunding projects. You don't seem to have issues and whatnot. Yes, you get some disaster films like the dreadful Chris Evans Anna DMS rom-com from earlier this year, but their track record is a lot stronger than Netflix, isn't it? As we kind of said, Netflix, it's inevitable at some point that they will end up being bought out. And that's the way it'll go. They have IPs that people want, and they aren't going to be making enough to justify. And when the SG strikes are done and dusted, and their finances start to be exposed somewhat bit more.
Dare I say, I get a feeling that if they're going to be bought out, it'll be after Stranger Things finish, because they'll have no other major series left to go on, apart from, I guess, the Knives Out series. But
they got one more Knives Out, and look how that's happened. They didn't even give it if they give Irishman a wide release, Irishman makes money, they fund Killers of the Flowers Moon. I think there's a reason Scorsese's gone to Apple. There's a reason Napoleon, directed by Ridley Scott, starring Joaquin Phoenix, is now also going to be an Apple. And we are seeing that more and more, and it is very, very intriguing, the possibilities. And there's a weird way to talk about these. We've got a couple of other comments I'm going to bring up.
Yes.
Martin, hearing great things about the film. Regarding the criticism of the film from Molly and the Sash perspective, do you think Scorsese would have got more criticism? No, I don't think he would have. If I'm being honest, I don't think he's had a lot of criticism for this. There's such few criticisms of the film that it boils down to the runtime or this. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful term. If this was a train wreck for film, I think this would be a lot more prominent in the naked eye about Scorsese doing this, doing that. But I think my perspective on the matter is, and I don't mean this is a disrespectful way, and this isn't my arrogance within the film industry. I am very curious. We know how limited opportunities are for people from diverse backgrounds to make it in film in any capacity. Certainly direction. There's no denying that. Just look at the big budget blockbusters, the directors at the helm, and the proportional percentage rates. The opportunities are not there. I would be very curious to I don't want to be arrogant and say, where are the Assange directors? Because that sounds like the sort of mental MAGA sort of thing someone will say. But I am curious to... I'm sure there are filmmakers out there, and I imagine that the opportunities are even more limited than anybody else to do a film like this. If Scorsese, one of the greatest directors of all time, has struggles to get this film put into production, nobody else, very few names have a chance. And I'm saying we're in the era now where, if I'm going to be really honest and not biased, the only director whose name is a brand for blockbuster returns is Christopher Nolan. The Fabelmans was not a financial hit, and it's by the greatest living director we have. This isn't going to be a box office hit, and it's a historical epic by one of the greatest directors in film history. And Oppenheimer, the nuclear bomb film, because it's being directed by Christopher Nolan, let alone many of the great factors, it's as good as these other films we've spoke about. It's got the July release because it's Nolan. He's picked that release date. He picked all the principles for all the shooters got involved. Shot on black and white IMAX. Practical explosion, not CGI, everything. He's the only director left that is a brand. And the struggle we now have in the film history is going to reflect itself once more. The 60s studio system broke out, and then in the 70s came the auteurs, your Spielbergs, your Lucases, your Scorseses. I feel like we're in a really trying time where there's going to have to be a breakup in the next few years of studios at some point. Not like it was in the 60s, but I feel like in the next 10 years, there's going to be a new wave of directors.
I think
they're going to have
this is really weird. This is a really weird segue, but I think we're going to see it happen actually a lot sooner, especially because of the success of Taylor Swift, of all people, who's gone and produced her own work and has gone on her own two legs.
But she's got a net worth to be able to do that.
I know she does, but it's kind of proven that you kind of, if you've got the budget to do it, if you're able to do it.
Oh yeah, but what it's showing is, and this is what Nolan spoke about this week when he was asked about it, which is so strange. Nolan spoke about Taylor Swift. He said that, it shows, basically he used it to slag off the studios and said they didn't want to invest in it, but what it's shown is that even without a studio backing you, sorry, the other way around, they wanted to invest in it, but she didn't want them. But even without a studio backing a distribution methods, there has been able to be a gargantuan hit of box office. And that's wonderful for cinema owners, for the industry, which is what they need. And it once again makes the studios look awful. And I think at some point there's going to be an equilibrium. And I really do hope it is after these strikes that there is some form of bounce back, whether some CEOs come and go, all these film studios are now just like one studio owned by a company that owns 20 companies. There's going to need to be changes in the coming years. And I do think there'll be an emergence of new filmmakers out there. It won't be like the 70s where they just reshape the industry as a whole. But we're in like a new unknown era now where we're going to have directors who have worked with studios, who've done TV, who've done streaming stuff. Greta Gerwig, I think, is going to be one of the forefront ones. Like Christopher Nolan, she went and did a big commercial film. She put a stamp on it. She made one of the biggest films of the year. She's going to be able to go to studio next year and say, I want $100 million for this film. And we hope that they're going to get the opportunity to do so. And that's a weird tangent away from.
No, it was a necessary tangent. It was because it kind of maps out kind of where this sits in cinema at the moment and where cinema may be going. So
definitely. And that being said, we spoke about it quite a lot. I want to get your final thoughts. I know we've gone all over. It's been a bit different in this video, but if you get your final thoughts, we'll run out of mine, and then.
My final thoughts on this film are that it's one of the best of the year. I hope that it's kind of doesn't fade into kind of the mystery of cinema and people do forget about this film, because it does talk about an important subject matter that has been overlooked in the past. And the performances from the film are fantastic. The story told is gripping. It's thrilling. It's horrific. But because it's so horrific, you kind of become invested in it and you want to learn more about it. And that's exactly what, biopics are, these kind of historical dramas are meant to be about. They're meant to kind of shine a light on these different events so that you're able to kind of learn about them a bit more and go and explore a bit more and learn about the actual story behind them. And that's exactly what Scorsese's done here. He's an expert at his craft. He's done it over the years, and he's brought everyone together in a fantastic ensemble for one of the best films of the year. And I do hope that it does win Oscars. I know that it's up against some big names this year, and it will be down to kind of, do the Oscar voters prefer this film or do they prefer Oppenheimer? And I hope that if they do pick Oppenheimer, that this film does get some recognition and doesn't kind of fade out. But either way, it's respected amongst the film community. I mean, everyone was clapping at the end during the press screening. Everyone really loved it. Everyone was talking about it afterwards. So fantastic film, just brilliant, and a must watch in cinemas. Don't wait for it to come out on streaming. Go watch it in cinemas.
Yeah, I'm the same here. That again, I had high expectation for this film. It delivered on those fronts with some slight concerns, but the minor negatives we've had of this film pale in significance to anything of the positives. That you've got one of the best directors on his A game, surrounded by incredible talent. Whether that's Thelma Schoolmaker, once again, their collaboration going back to the start of his career, they've been working with each other for sort of 50 plus years, and the fact that they're still being. You spoke about how awful some of the editing was I know someone else has spoken. Sorry, I did a video talking about Ferrari and how awful the editing is, and it just lingers on people for like 10 seconds longer than it should. Not a wasted shot in a 3.5 hour runtime. Not a wasted moment. The camera on Lily Gladstone for an extra 5 seconds warrants it. It's how they choose to do it, and I just think it's an unbelievable film that will go down as one of the best of this year. And I'd be really curious. I've only seen about half, I think, of Scorsese's films. I think I've seen about maybe 13, 14. So I've still got a load more to get through. But what a film to go with, and I hope it just gets some recognition over the coming months, aside from the standard film crowd. And I'll be excited to see what they sort of follow it up with in the coming months in respect to the Oscars, the award season, and what we're going to be looking out for, what's going to be the big ones. But so yes, final words, do see it at the cinema. Now, if someone says, do you think you should watch this in IMAX? I mean, I always think people should go to the cinema to watch any film if they want to watch it, but I was really intrigued by watching a drama at the IMAX. I think I think I saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood at the IMAX, which was strange. But I like the big screen, but I think for a film like this, you're able to soak in so much more of that production. So again, I've got a Cineworld card, right? My IMAX ticket was £4. It wasn't like 20 like some. So if you can get to an IMAX screening, I'd give it a pump. See if it's worth it. If you're into your IMAX, you're into your big screen experiences, see if it's like watching a drama, because I just love being on the bigger screen at my cinema to watch it in too. Don't want to be in a small one where I'm looking up, wanting to be able to sit there, chill out, taking it. It's 3.5 hours long. I'm committed to this film. Let's see if I can get some of that commitment back. So that's going to do it for my thoughts. That's going to round out this review. A massive thank you to everybody commenting. And as always, if you're not watching it live, you're watching it later, do comment your thoughts on Kiss the Flower Moon. No comment is a bad comment if you've seen the film. If you haven't, as I said, this new review series, we're not doing it for every new release. The films that we want to be able to deep dive into, we will. Whether it's new, whether it's an anniversary of a classic, we're going to be able to use this to deep dive into things a little more than we can normally. And obviously, we've got an hour and a half on this one, which sort of explains that. And there's a lot of other things happening on the channel, so be sure to subscribe. We've got the David Fincher retrospective continuing tomorrow. We've got the Dragon Tattoo. We've also got some new releases coming up. We've had one of our busiest months of the year with the film festival, which Tate's done a lot of reviews for. There's a playlist for those on our channel's homepage. We've got the film for the weekend recommendation every Friday. We'll upload a short to our Instagram and to our YouTube. So there's a lot of changes happening, some good changes. We've got home media reviews are back. Did a review for Barbie. Yes, here it is in my hand. Look at that. Even the 4K is pink, which is a lovely little touch. But yeah, thank you to everyone watching for your support as always. As I said, we're going through some changes. We've got a lot of stuff in the pipeline, so do stick around for those. Go grab us on linktree.com. You can use that to find whatever social media platforms you prefer using. You can find us on there. We do post on all of them. That is Letterboxd, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Yeah, I don't know what else. Tate, is there anything else? Am I missing anything else?
I think that's everything covered. I think that is
brilliant. Well, this is it. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.